Welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast, where we're all about sharing the forbidden secrets and slightly embellished truths about corporate cybersecurity programs. We're ranting, we're raving, and we're telling you the stuff that nobody talks about on their fancy website and trade show giveaways, all to protect you from cyber criminals. And now, here's your hosts, Mike Rotondo, Zach Fuller, and Lauro Chavez.
Hello, and welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast. This is your co-host, Zach Fuller, joined by Mike Rotondo and Lauro Chavez. And today we're talking about, does cybersecurity even matter? Why do we care? Who cares? Do people care about cybersecurity? We're going to unpack some of these things here and talk about what we see, what's going on, not only in the news, but just out there in the world, the stuff that happens every single day that often doesn't make the news. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But before we do, Mike, you want to kick us off with the news?
Yeah, so here's the headlines for today. We've got some things from the feds going on. There's a new bill to require cyber attack reporting in the U.S. Senators on the Homeland Security Committee have introduced new legislation last September, as in last month, requiring critical infrastructure companies to report cyber attacks to the federal government within hours. The bill also aims to mandate most organizations to tell the federal government if they make ransomware payments. If enacted, the Cyber Incident Notification Act of 2021 would require critical infrastructure owners and operators to notify the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, within 72 hours if they're experiencing cyber attacks, which is a loosely defined term. But this should be interesting considering that sometimes it takes over 100 days to determine that you've been hacked. So
yeah, but I mean, good stuff though, right? I mean, I can't say it would be a bad thing. So you should update your incident response.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it's unworkable. If anybody watching any of the hearings and watching some of these senators ask questions, they've got no idea what they're talking about half the time. So that's my concern, is that they're going to put together a law that is nonsensical. So
true.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far down a rat hole, but the Facebook interviews were quite interesting. U.S. government mandating zero trust approach for software supply chains. In the wake of SolarWinds attack last year, the president used an executive order in May advocating for mandatory software bills of materials, or SBOMs, to increase software transparency and counter supply chain attacks. SBOMs are machine-readable documents that provide definitive record of the components used to build a software product, including open source software. Since the executive order, software makers and buyers have been trying to make sense of how SBOM supports supply chain security. That would include yours truly. CISA names 3 exceptionally dangerous behaviors to avoid, and I applaud CISA for this because they were so in-depth that we couldn't figure them out. Not using MFA, using default passwords, and using end-of-life software. I'm so grateful for them telling us that. Apache issues another emergency patch for exploited flaws. IT managers hoping for a bit of respite after being warned to immediately patch their software earlier this week, I think it was actually last week, are facing a fresh problem. The previous fix didn't work as advertised, so there's another fix out there to solve that issue. Report online consumers not taking cybersecurity seriously, and I think we're going to talk a bit about this, but Bitdefender releases a report that analyzed and dissected cyber hygiene practices employed by consumers that shop online, and their findings weren't positive. They surveyed over 10,000 consumers in 11 countries, and they learned that online shoppers are largely reusing passwords across multiple websites. Over 60% of consumers have experienced at least one security threat on their smartphone, and nearly half of American parents don't oversee their children's internet activity. Lastly, data masking is the answer to a data breach, according to Bluebricks. According to the stats, the rate of data breaches is growing rapidly every year compared to mid-year of 2018, where the number of reported breaches was up by 54% in 2019. Combine data masking technologies with other data protection techniques, for example, encryption, data activity monitoring, security information and event management, and collectively implementing extensive data privacy protections. It's an interesting read. I'm trying to sell you a product, but it's interesting. There's some interesting data in there. There's some additional headlines that we're going to post with the podcast. Thing on AWS, there's more Android issues. The Iranians are causing problems with some hacking, and 7-Eleven got breached with that. Laurel, what do we got?
7-Eleven owned by the Iranians got breached?
No, they're collecting facial recognition without consent at cost.
Oh, I thought it was the new Slurpee ransomware.
That's what I was thinking.
Around.
Yeah.
Let me get my Mountain Dew Slurpee there, my big slurp, mega slurp. To tag along with your HTTP server, Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid on top of a diaper full of poo. That would be Apache HTTP server, and we do have an exploit for version 2.4.50. The path traversal and remote execution, the RCE, has been modified to work on the version again. So please update to 2.4.51 immediately. This exploit POC that has been validated by several testers is available for all of you heads out there with Metasploit Pro or Metasploit Framework, which makes it even more terrifying. So get that patched. SonicWall, Sonic OS 7 has a host header injection that will get you owned. So if you're running anything SonicWall, Sonic OS 7, make sure that you're updating that. And for everybody out there on SolarWinds, pretty interesting SolarWinds debacle here with an unquoted service path for one of the Kiwi cat tools in version 3.11. That POC is validated and available for everybody with Metasploit. So make sure that you are checking that out and getting that updated. Zach, that's all I have for exploits. Can we talk about comic books?
Are you sure? Because
Please.
I didn't hear WordPress in there.
No, I'm not saying that word anymore. It's the unnameable.
Good, it's good. It's kind of refreshing. I'm sorry I brought it up, but
it's okay. Yeah, it's not as it's I have a little Christmas tree that hangs in the toilet room, and it says Microsoft on it.
well, outstanding. We are going to unpack
like
a
pine.
topic here about whether or not people care about cybersecurity, about data protection, and what we can do about it, most importantly, right? Before we dive into that, though, let's take a quick commercial break.
Want even more Cyber Rants? Be sure to subscribe to the Cyber Rants podcast. Get your copy of our best-selling book, Cyber Rants, on Amazon today. This podcast is brought to you by Silent Sector, the firm dedicated to building world-class cybersecurity programs for mid-market and emerging companies across the U.S. Silent Sector also provides industry-leading penetration tests and cyber risk assessments. Visit silentsector.com and contact us today.
And we're back. So Risk IQ is a company that puts out this report every year called the Evil Internet Minute. It's been out for a little while, but I thought it'd be appropriate to reference here in this discussion because one of the big metrics that it goes by is the amount lost to cyber incidents per minute. And that amount, the amount lost, or this is for companies around the world, every single minute to cyber incidents is $1.8 million. So $1.8 million a minute is basically it's worse than being flushed down the toilet, right? Because it's going into the hands of cyber criminals and they're using that to increase their capabilities, right? And they're putting that money toward terrorism and everything else. So pretty bad stuff going on. There's compromised records, 525,000 per minute. 525,000 compromised records per minute. There's 1,095 DDoS attacks per minute, distributed denial of service attacks per minute. They're organizations victimized by ransomware, 6 per minute, every single minute. So pretty crazy stuff. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Do people care? Or are people still treating, and based on your news article, Mike, it sounds like some of the studies out there showing that people are just not, with all this stuff going on, they just kind of throw up their hands and say, oh, well. So does cybersecurity matter? Do our lives matter? Get into some deep philosophical questions.
Why are we here, Zach?
Why are we here?
I think we're here to do a podcast.
And I don't mean to be a downer, but the topic is, I think it's a little unfortunate. You know?
I think it is unfortunate. Yeah, I think it matters. I think it's a very clear 1 and a 0. I don't want to get binary with everybody, but I mean, it really does seem like there's really not that middle ground. I think we have, speaking from our clients, I think we have clients, right? All of our clients care. But when we're talking with clients, potential clients, right, that may or may not have the privilege to work with us, they seem to be that it's either one or the other, right? They care or they don't. And it's very clear that they don't. And they probably won't care until something happens. And I think it by nature, right? Nobody wants to do services on your vehicle until you get a warning light on the dash.
I was going to say, right, why change the oil, regularly? Why not just kind of just run it and run it and run it, right? Who cares about prevention? If it's still going, just keep it going, right? I think that's a lot of people's mindset when it comes to their use of technology.
Well, I think the problem is still this, and we still see this occasionally, is I don't have anything anyone would want to steal. Is that attitude? Or who's going to care about my password at my Amazon account and my Old Navy account and my, Fanatics account? What if they break in? So what? It's those kind of things that, it's a fundamental misunderstanding. And I think one of the failings is that cybersecurity training for work is not translating to home. And I think that's part of the problem from a consumer perspective, is they're not putting one and one together. They're not translating those practices they're forced to at work to working at home, to their own personal lives. And I think if you put an emphasis on that in your training, that it would benefit the worker at home as well in their personal life, those numbers may drop to a certain extent. On the other side, CFOs running compliance and security and IT projects are looking at dollars, and a lot of times the tech voices don't have a say in the matter, and they're looking at dollars and cents and trying to figure out how cheaply they can get away with getting something done. And they're failing to see the fact that mitigating a breach beforehand costs X number of dollars. After the fact can cost 10 times X because of the reputational damage, the replacement of, rebuilding of systems, and the loss of client faith. And I think you have to take the dollar and cents. You have to be able to translate the cost of security measures to, why this benefits a company to get through some of those accountants' brains. So.
Yeah, that's very much what we see, and I think that they see. You're right. They see the cost, but that coupled with, if they knew a breach was going to happen this year and it was guaranteed this year, I guarantee the proactive cybersecurity budget would be in place right away. But I think another kind of misunderstanding that leads to poor decision making is that, well, yeah, it could happen, but it's probably very unlikely that it'll happen to us, ever, much less within the next 10 years. And I think that that's a lot of the thought process. It's probably just not going to happen to us. It hasn't happened before. Why would it happen now?
That's true. I think there's a lot of Dunning-Kruger effect happening, right, in kind of both hemispheres of the business, and it always comes back to two things: either lack of knowledge three things: lack of knowledge over confidence, or a dollar problem.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Or I guess overstated confidence in their systems, and I think we see that a lot, where they believe that they've deployed to a place where they're unhackable. Right. And then they have the kind of compounded delusion that, well, on top of that, we don't have anything anybody would want. I think there's those two things. And there are certainly some very, very, very secured data, and there's some very well deployed architecture. However, to, think that nothing's undefeatable is, well, it's silly, really, especially with quantum computing where it is today, and so we've seen an increase in highly intelligent attacks carried out against organizations.
Well, and you can also add case in point. The client just brought this up to us yesterday or the day before, I can't remember which. But remember, the solution for getting rid of a hard drive, drill a hole through it. It'll be fine. Well, now they have technology out there that'll now read a hard drive that just has something drilled through it. So people are going to great lengths to steal data for a reason. If they're going to that length to figure out how to reverse engineer a hard drive that's had a hole drilled through it to be able to pull that data.
Yeah. Well, I think another big misconception that we see is that somebody else is taking care of security, right? And that's another reason why it sometimes doesn't get the budget it needs, is because, oh, well, we're in the cloud, right? We use Office 365 and that's one thing, but when people say they use AWS or Azure, so they're fine and they're SOC 2 compliant, it makes me cringe. I think there needs to be a lot of education around why that is not the case. Because you're in the cloud doesn't mean somebody else is taking care of your security for you.
Yeah, it's like daycare. It's like, do you just, let anybody take your kids sort of thing, right? I don't want this to sound like some circumlocution around us, selling services, because it doesn't matter if you use Silent Sector or anybody else. What's important is that you find some way to secure your business, because what the skin we have in the game is the same skin that every other American has in the game, is that the moment that you take this for granted and you have high confidence over your systems, unwarrantedly so, because you've never done a pen test or a technical assessment of any kind, and something happens and you have to pay ransomware, now you've just hurt everybody, because now all the same criminals that are attacking everybody else, and they get through to you because you made mistakes, now they have extra ammunition and monetary, specifically ammunition, to now front more attacks against everybody else. So you perpetuate the problem when you pay out, and it's concerning. And I think that's a large reason why you see this legislation try to come in, where they're talking about, they want to know if you've paid ransom, because they want to try to track this money back to a criminal central, or a set of cells that they can pinpoint to that are warning attacks against American businesses. So by not being proactive and not taking this seriously, you weaken the rest of us. In the same way that, and I don't want to even get in that conversation, but in the same way you could have about a vaccine with a malicious virus that's going around, okay? And the same argument that you could put there, right, that the whole thing makes us all better, in this case, it really does, because, we're wielding technology. These companies are being allowed to wield technology in a manner that is unfortunately not secure, and it's causing all the rest of the companies harm.
And additionally, it's not so much that necessarily 100% of the time they're going to steal data. There's an article I came across, I think it was last week, but I didn't share it, or I may have put the headline into the podcast, was a lot of ransomware now is simply implementing something to mine cryptocurrency. That's all they're doing with it. They're just trying to create a breach, a hole, a web shell.
Monero.
Yeah, Monero got nailed. I mean, that's all they're trying to do. They're trying to use it to mine cryptocurrency. So what they're stealing from you is your compute power, and they're, which translates loosely to your electric bill and all that kind of stuff, right? But in reality, once they've established that to use you for mining cryptocurrency, they already have a foothold.
Yeah,
God
it's
knows what
simple.
else they're gonna do, right?
Exactly. I'll put you in I'll just walk it through you real quick. I'm going to break into your systems and I'm going to say, okay, what do I have options to? Is there data here that's worth selling on the dark net? No. Is there data here that I can use to get into other systems and other individuals? If the answer is yes, no, that could be good. What else is here? Okay, so let's say I don't have any of that data. I'm just looking at, some files and some emails. There's nothing really here tangible, but there's compute. There's compute and there's dependencies. What is this organization dependent on? Oh, they have a SQL database. I'll just lock that up and then I'll ask for a ransom. There's no data in it that I care about, but I'll lock that up, I'll ask for a ransom. In the meanwhile, on these two Dell deprecated edge servers, I'm going to load some crypto ransomware that is going to lock it. And while it's locked, it's going to mine from Monero or whatever other crypto I choose. And it's simple as that. It has nothing to do with what you do, what you're doing, what organizations that you serve, or what clients you have. In some cases, right, that may be the case, but in a lot of times it's opportunistic. I'm going to come in there, I'm going to be like, what can I do here? I need to make money. This is about money. This isn't about, I don't like what you're selling on the internet. This is about coming in and getting money out of you. This is about, if you don't have data that I can sell or reuse, I'm going to drop some form of gear on here that's going to misuse your technologies, and I'm going to move on, and hopefully you don't notice it. That would be my best case scenario here, is that if I know you don't have enough money to pay a large ransom, I'm just going to drop a bunch of miners on your gear, and because you're not smart enough to figure any of this stuff out anyway, and users are going to complain about slowness, and maybe you'll throw another server in for me to throw some more gear on later, and I can just continue to mine crypto on your hardware.
Exactly.
it's a good idea to set up a honeypot with a fake company financials file in it that shows $20 on the balance sheet, so that they know, okay, this is probably somebody that I don't want to demand a ransom from. Is it worth my time for the $20, you know? But
it's as simple as that, though, really.
it really is. It's a game of economics, right? It's no different. It's the same thing with the war on drugs, right? I mean, it really comes down to economics. And so when we make to dispel another myth, right? That oh, everything's hackable, so why bother, right? Well, when we make it more costly for the cyber criminals to do what they do, it's gonna hinder their business, right? So when their return on investment starts to go negative, well, that's not a very good business to be in, and they won't be in it for very long, right? So when it's harder for them to get in, actually make money out of breaching your environment, that costs them. And so that's the name of the game. And we need to look at it from the economic standpoint. But let's talk a little bit. I mean, what do we do about all this? Because one of the things, and this is, I don't want to get too philosophical here, but and maybe philosophical, maybe putting it that way is a stretch. But I look at what's going on in the world, especially with our, the younger generations and stuff that are, let's take TikTok, for example, not to go too far down a rabbit hole. But we saw through that a lot of the younger people don't really care about their data, right? They're putting it all out there anyway, all their information, sharing freely, kind of wide open economy, sharing economy, I should say. All this stuff, it's kind of been, it's become more the norm. And how do we get them to understand that, hey, giving nation state threat actors a whole bunch of data about your personal life is not maybe necessarily the best thing? Because if we can't solve that right now, I don't know that the future generations are going to really care when it gets, comes down to company data, customer lists, all that kind of stuff. They're going to think, oh, well, I don't care if people have my, information. Why would anybody else care? I think it's a culture shift that may be happening that we may need to correct. And thankfully that's why we're doing this podcast and have our 500 million listeners, so we can make that change today.
Nice. Well, I just to tie up the previous conversation on cybercrime, I think there's a saying is that the hungry human goes after whatever game he can catch, or she can catch, right? Or we can catch, or anyways. But yeah, you know what I mean? And so if it's hard, like, it's hard to kill big game, right? And so you go after smaller stuff, and that's where you watch all these survival shows. They're very seldom getting deer. They're mostly there's mostly mollusks and bugs, and so don't be one of the lower belly crawlers from a technology standpoint. Be an apex predator. And if you're an apex predator from a technology standpoint, then you can thwart off a lot of lesser criminals from their abilities to get into your systems and cause you harm. But how do we make people care, right? So and Zach, you mentioned TikTok. Just for those that don't know, TikTok was it was dispelled as spyware for China, and I think that however you look at it, okay, it's questionable software, okay, and you're right, people don't care. They're putting anything that they want on there. It's probably being leveraged for machine learning, right? Everything that every human does on there is probably being leveraged to make the next robo, I don't want to say the Borger here, but you know what I mean? I'm saying that this is all going to go into some big learning program, right? Some big data learning program, all these videos and all this stuff everybody's doing. And I think it's a wonderful thing that everybody can share this type of creativity and close with one another, because I think that we should have that kind of liberty to share this with everybody, right? To share what we want with everybody. And I want to say that, share what we want with everybody. That's where I think you draw that line, is where people extract data that you're not aware of, or extract information from you that you didn't wish to provide, right? It's like coming home and you may have an acquaintance that you've met a couple times, and they're sitting in your living room drinking your beer, and you may like that person. You like, I invited you over here to drink beer with me, but to come home and see you sitting in here drinking beer is just weird. And I think that's
I already apologized for that, Laura. Why do you have to keep bringing it up?
Look, I'm gonna bring it up over and over again. It's just weird. All right. Like, and so I think that's.
If you've been wearing pants, Zach, it might have been acceptable.
I'm telling you, that's exactly my point. That's exactly my point.
You forget one detail, and you never hear the end of it.
No. You don't. In my underwear is even weirder. Okay, so we don't need to get into this conversation, but that was just strange. Okay, so yeah, just remember you're clothed and fully clothed, and that might be okay. But rhetoric aside, right? I mean, that really, I think, is where you draw the line, is where you willingly give this information versus someone takes it without your consent. And that's the whole point of data privacy. And I think that for the individual humans that own the right to their videos that they take and that they post on TikTok, that's certainly one thing, right? But for the organizations and the companies that have that data and use it to sell you stuff and use algorithms to pitch types of things your way, it's their responsibility to make sure that you have their consent to use that data in that method, and that they're protected with that data. Just as you drop your car at the shop, you want them to take care of your car. You don't want to get it with scratches and dings all over it, right? I mean, that's just basic expectations of a service-related industry. You want your food to come out with no hair on it. I get that, right? I mean, everybody should get that. This is just the same thing. And I think the way that you resolve it really is with, unfortunately, it's going to have some legislation, but cyber insurance, I think, is a great way to resolve it. It's required to drive and operate a dangerous piece of machinery. Well, your technologies can be dangerous, especially if they're getting used to attack other technologies that Americans are using or to mine their data. So, where do we draw the line to say that if you operate technology in a manner that stores data that you must have cyber insurance? Yeah, and then cyber insurance is going to require you to have, a modern car with wheels and all that kind of stuff, right?
That's the good thing, I think, about cyber insurance, because even though it's a reactive measure, the insurance companies are getting better and better about asking, doing more sophisticated security questionnaires, which is awesome, right? It's just to be able to get the insurance in the first place. I think that certainly helped. The problem that people face with the compliance stuff, though, is that it's generally, it's focused on one type of data or very industry specific, or it's not all encompassing of their organization. So a lot of companies still have it wrong. They're still chasing one compliance framework to the next rather than building a holistic security practice. And I think that just takes education, right? Especially at the leadership level, the executive level. I mean, I think we really need to have more technology education from the beginning. I mean, from kids at school and stuff. I mean, yeah, they might learn to type or whatever, but they're not learning the fundamentals of how their devices work and talk to each other and that sort of thing. So I think that could be tremendous. Another thing that I would like to see as far in the education realm is the more data we can collect about the breaches and activities and what's going on, and share kind of some of the figures from the Evil Internet Minute report. But if we were able to have more specific data by location of companies, by industry, company size, all of that, and really break it down to a more granular level, we could make it hit closer to home and I know that they're getting better, but still a lot of that data is very loose, and it changes depending on where the source is and all that. So if we could get a more definitive or better system of defining costs of breaches, where they're happening, where they're the most likely, average downtimes, all of those things, and help people understand that for their specific business, then we get away from the broad kind of mind-boggling numbers. We get down the specifics, and that way the CFO, for example, could say, okay, well, I can pretty much guarantee that if I don't do this in the next 5 years, I'm going to have to spend X amount of dollars, and they'll have that figure dialed in much with a lot more specific information. So I don't know how we do that. By any means, there are people that are a lot better than me when it comes with data aggregation and all that. But I think that would be tremendous, because people got to wake up to what's going on, and dollars and cents helps them do that.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, unfortunately. Well, they're wielding, it's just like, they make you get a driver's license before you can drive a car. You have to go to driving school. Yeah. We have organizations that can spin up these technologies on cloud infrastructure on a whim and just use them. It's like, oh, I got this code that somebody wrote me. I'm just going to, get somebody to put it up here, and I've got this business. And, if you market anything right, you can gain trust and you can get people there. And it's just kind of like it's just waiting to happen sort of thing. It's unfortunately, it's a sinkhole, right? It's that, it's there. You have to have specific equipment to see it, and it's just a matter of time.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think hopefully cyber insurance will help
people put at least some proactive measures in place. Good stuff today. Any final thoughts, ideas, any ways that we can change the world today in this episode?
Love one another.
That's for sure.
I love you guys. Anyways, no final thoughts. I think we kicked around the can a lot today for this topic.
We beat the dead horse enough. Well, yeah, I think it is important. But for those of you listening, if you have ideas, if you have thoughts, if you have questions for us, please go to cyberrantspodcast.com and send them our way, or reach out on LinkedIn. And then also all the news articles are posted, the links to the articles and stuff on cyberrantspodcast.com pages. So you can go look through all the episodes. There's a lot of good stuff there. And by all means, let us know what you want us to talk about future episodes. We're interested in what you're interested in. We're here to kind of give back and spread some good knowledge around. So reach out and have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining, and we'll talk next time.
Pick up your copy of the CyberRants book on Amazon today. And if you're looking to take your cybersecurity program to the next level, visit us online at www.silentsector.com. Join us next time for another edition of the CyberRants Podcast.